Welcome back to the Practical Church Podcast. My name is Dylan Dawson, and this podcast is designed to help you plant and grow healthy churches. Today, I'm going to share with you 5 questions to ask yourself when hiring church staff. Now, as always, the Practical Church Podcast is brought to you in partnership with Mission Support. They offer a number of services. Real quickly, today I want to tell you about their ongoing web support. The team at Mission Support is fully equipped to handle the ongoing web support for your website, that whatever you need, they are here for you when you need them. They provide dedicated and priority-based support. They design and update your website as needed. They have very quick turnaround times, quality support you'll be happy with, hosting and maintenance and security, all the things that go into a really high quality church website. They are happy to do it for you, and they've got a lot of great churches that are happy with their results. So if you're looking to upgrade your website and get some help with someone who's got knowledge and expertise in how to do it, check out missionsupport.com today and check out their ongoing web support. And of course, if you want more from the Practical Church Show, you can go to missionsupport.com/practical, submit a question for a future episode, and get connected that way. And now today's episode. All right, well, in the Practical Church Podcast over the years, talked about a lot of different things. This is a completely new topic, like haven't even hit on at all at any point, at any time in the past. Today, we're gonna share 5 questions to ask yourself when hiring church staff. Now, my goal for this is not to give you, as always, the bland, obvious, duh, I knew that. These are things over the years that I've learned are really important and helpful to really know, hey, is this actually a good hire for our church? So the first one might seem a little bit somewhat obvious, but the next 4, they might seem a little countercultural or kind of unnecessary, or maybe like, hey, I'm not sure why that matters, but if you let me explain myself, I think you'll understand where I'm coming from. So if you're looking to hire staff right now, or in the future at some point, maybe even high quality volunteers, this is really helpful for you to think through over the 8-ish years that I've been doing this at New City, the lessons that we and I have learned along the way. So here we go. 5 questions to ask yourself when hiring church staff. Number 1, are they a part of your church? Are they a part of your church? Now, you obviously don't have to hire someone who already goes to your church, and sometimes you can't. Maybe the job you're looking for, the size of your church, maybe you have certain qualifications for certain positions that that are needed that they don't have internally. I gotta hire outside. Absolutely, that's totally fine. However, I would suggest, generally speaking, there always are exceptions, I know, but generally speaking, internal is always the best. It is always best to hire people internally for a few reasons. One, they already really know what the church is about. I mean, sometimes when somebody's looking for a ministry job, and maybe you've been there in the past, you might be willing to forego some things that you might not like, or things that you might disagree with because you need a job or you're looking for a job. If you have someone who's already going to your church, you already know they like the church, they know the DNA, they're part of it, they're excited to be there. So that's really helpful. Like, they know the church, they're not really going to try to come on staff and kind of change everything. So that's really helpful. It's also helpful because you also really get to know them. Like, more than just a few references and a couple of interviews and spending a few hours together. Like, you know them. You can get feedback from other people in your church, what they think about this person. There's just a lot of great things. If they go to your church, you know them a lot better as well. So again, I know there are many situations where it's not possible, but if it's possible, hiring from your church within is like always the best. If there's possible, the qualifications there, all that. New City over the years, again, we'll be publicly celebrating 8 years, I guess, in April. So maybe 6-ish more months. We have only ever hired internally. Now, partially, it's not because there hasn't been times we wouldn't have. It's just always worked out that way. I think there's been times worship leaders are really, really hard. What I found in talking to other pastors as well, hiring a part-time worship position might be the hardest position to hire, because if they're looking for full-time, you can't do that. And a lot of musicians that are good and good leaders, if they're going to get paid for it, they're going to go somewhere that might be able to pay them and do things that they're looking for, or people that have got a lot of talent, quality. Maybe they've got a family. If you have someone who's a part-time worship leader, they got to love it, and they either maybe have to have a spouse who works and makes more money, or they've got a side job as well, so it can be difficult. So that's kind of a side thing. I've just encouraged you, if you're there, I have found that hiring a worship director or a leader, whatever you call it, for a part-time position is very, very hard. So that being said, even in that position, we've been fortunate at New City that all of our hires have been internal, which has been great because, again, you already know the people, you already know they love New City. Now, it doesn't mean that every person we've hired has turned out and done a great job and everything's always gone well. That's not always been the case. But there's a lot of questions that you don't have to worry about if they're already at your church. So, and ideally, typically, generally speaking, I would recommend hiring internally if you can. Again, are they already a part of your church is a big, big helpful thing. Again, one of the things that I have not experienced personally at New City, but I have seen over and over again, is when churches are hiring or somebody's looking for a job, you are willing to maybe compromise things that you shouldn't. Either on the church hiring perspective, maybe there's something about this that you might not quite sure is going to work out, but you really need the help. Or the person taking the job, there might be things that they don't like, but they're like, hey, I need a job, Finding church work can be difficult in pastoral ministry, that sort of thing. And so sometimes it's hard, and people, I don't think it's fair to say people are desperate, but there's very often not going to be an ideal 100% everything's amazing fit anyway. And so you just got to be careful of those things, I'll just say. But are they a part of your church? Ideally, internal is always best if possible. That's a big question to ask. Now, the rest of them might be not so obvious. Number 2, do they show up every Sunday? Do they show up every Sunday? Listen, especially after COVID, people's attendance habits are maybe not what they once were. Generally speaking, there are a lot of people that still are very committed, but I'd say the average church person who's involved attender has gone down. I don't know if this is still true, but anecdotal. My experience was, after coming out of COVID, it was one less Sunday a month. So if they came every Sunday, yeah, they might still be doing that for the most part. But if they came on average 3 Sundays a month, they come to 2 Sundays a month, they come to 1. So do they come every Sunday? This is important for a couple reasons. One, if you work at a church, you got to be there on Sunday. Okay, so if they're not already in the rhythm and habit of hey, I'm going to be there every Sunday, you might run into a little bit of issue of no, you actually got to be here every week. You can't be traveling every weekend. Got to be here. 2, it doesn't set a good precedent for your leaders, the people who serve, the rest of the people at your church, if you're giving leadership positions to people who are not consistently there. Because what it kind of shows is we just want people who are good at what they're doing, whether or not they're really committed to the mission of the church. Now, there might be, again, there always could be exceptions. Maybe you're hiring somebody who the job they were in previously made a consistent Sunday morning, whatever, difficult. Okay, fine. But generally speaking, if they're not already in the habit, it can be a little rough to be no, you actually have to be here every single Sunday. Also, if they show up every Sunday, it also shows, man, how invested and excited are they really? Is this really a priority for them? And was it a priority for them before money got involved? And I'm not knocking somebody for wanting a job. I'm just saying but do they already love the church? The capital C church, because, a local church attendance is important to them, and lower C church, the church that you're at. Do they love both? Do they love the capital C church and the body of Christ? And do they love this church that they're actually a part of? I've just learned so much over the years. Those who consistently show up on Sunday are going to be your best volunteers, your best leaders, and your best staff members because they already love the church and they want to be there and help it regardless. So a big thing here. Do they already show up pretty much every single Sunday? That to me is a big qualifier. As I'm recording this live, so this will happen before this episode actually comes out. This coming Saturday, I'm doing a men's gathering with a bunch of men at the church. And this wasn't a church announced thing, a church event thing. I and the elders emailed, I don't know, let's say 25-ish men at our church. And one of the things is we're trying to create some more eldership pathways. We're trying to grow more elders internally than we have in the past. And so all that to say, I emailed a bunch of guys and say, hey, we're doing this thing. We want to talk about leadership for men at New City and eldership and just what that would look like in the future if you're ever interested. We've gotten a lot of response. A whole bunch of guys are coming, way more than I thought. And so it's really cool. But one of the things of the people that I emailed is do they show up consistently on Sunday? And it's not just about future elder development. We're just talking about leadership in general. But one of the things that I'm going to be talking about on Saturday is hey, man, how consistent you are on Sunday is going to play a part in the leadership ability you have at our church. Because Sundays are important and we want to show our people that we matter. And it's the one time a week that we all get to gather together. So I just think it's really helpful to ask. This person's character might be awesome. Their competency might be really, really high. But do they already show up every single Sunday? Sickness, traveling once in a while, that's fine. But do they show up every single Sunday already? If they don't, it might not be as great a fit as you think, or they might not be as excited about the church as you might think if they're not already there. Again, again, you got to change the habit of coming every once in a while to coming every Sunday, and that can be hard for some people. So, do they show up every single Sunday? I think is a great question to ask. That was number 2. Number 3, do they give financially? Do they give financially? Now, I'm not saying, I know there's maybe bylaws or expectations, whatever. I'm not saying you have to give financially to your church or a church staff member has to give. I'm not saying that they have to do that. I think there's wisdom. We can talk about generosity, all these sort of things at New City. Generosity is one of our values to be a partner at New City. So like if you're going to come on staff, financial generosity should be part of it as well. But the piece about the financial generosity, it's not really about the amount, but it's about, is it consistent? And is it more than like $20 a month? And the reason why I say that is because financial generosity demonstrates how committed and excited somebody is about their local church. Now, obviously, people make different amount of money, so I'm not saying it has to be a certain percentage or anything like that. But if someone is financially partnering with their local body and being generous in that way, that also says they're committed. It's why, and I've talked about this in other episodes, I highly recommend that pastors have access to giving records. I would recommend that you would see those. If you're a pastor, lead pastor, that sort of thing. I have access to New Cities. Now, I don't look at them hardly ever. I do look at them once a week to look for new givers because we email all new givers and who they give when they give for the first time just to say thank you and, say thank you and here's how what we do with your finances, here's what you can expect from us, that sort of thing. And then every once in a while, if I see a large gift come in that's abnormal, I will reach out and I will say thank you. Now, so I'm not checking all the time, but I do think it's helpful. For example, over the years, I've learned that sometimes people who've been very angry or upset or very opinionated about something, when you go and look at their giving, this has happened before. Someone who was at New City for a couple of years, they were serving and they were really, they started to get upset and mad and they wanted to meet. And so we met. Before I met with them, they ended up leaving the church. And it's fine. I'm not saying New City is awesome and we don't have any faults. I'm not saying that. But before I met with them, I looked up their giving because I didn't think they give very much, but I assumed they had given. They'd never given in the 2.5 years they were here. And so for me, that really got to the conversation. It's you're not really, I don't know how invested you are with our church. And again, there's a lot of assumptions. I think if you're listening to this, you get that, you kind of get my heart behind this. I'm not saying again, you have to give us your money or else you don't care about Jesus or you don't love the church. I know there are times where medical emergencies, single parent, that there can be legitimate reasons why people aren't giving. I know for this person situation that wasn't the case. And it wasn't a judgment for it, but it helped me reframe going into the conversation and then so we had a conversation and they left and it's fine. I'm not knocking them. I'm not saying they're 100% wrong and New City is 100% right. But this has happened on more than one occasion where someone's giving and their anger or their upsetment or their opinionated-ish about an issue is kind of correlated. The less they give, the more angry they get. Now, this isn't to say also that people who give financially consistently don't ever get upset. That has happened as well at New City Church. But it's just always been interesting to me, those who are financially partnering with our church, even when I have to have hard conversations or they're upset or they've got questions, the tone of the conversation is way different. They're committed to the church. We want to see New City thrive. They're invested in it. So even when there's disagreement or there's anger or there's resentment or there's hurt, even that conversation is different because they clearly care about the church. So all I want to say, if they already go to your church, that's helpful. If they don't go to the church, I do think that's an appropriate thing to ask. Do you give financially? Or maybe talk to me about your generosity, because I think that's just a habit, especially if that's an important thing to your church. For us at New City, it's important because what you do with your money guides your heart. Your heart does not guide your money. One of the most practical things you can do to grow in your faith is to be financially generous. And so I think a good question to ask is, do they give financially? Because that shows, how invested or excited are they or bought in they are to this local church that you are hiring them to be a part of. Do they give financially? I think is a really good question to ask. Now, here is number 4. Are they involved in all the things a member or partner, whatever you call it at your church, should be doing? Are they already doing all the things that a member or partner should be doing? Because again, if you're hiring somebody on, the expectation is they're a leader at your church, and so they're doing the things everyone else is doing. And so at New City, we ask people to make their Sunday attendance a priority. So if they're not already doing that, again, that's going to be hard. We ask people to be in a group. We ask people to give financially, and we ask people to serve in some capacity. And we talk about more of that at our process, with people who join the church. But anyway, those are the things we ask. Give, be in a group, and serve, and obviously make Sunday attendance a priority. Now, for us, if somebody's not doing those things, like it's going to be hard for them to lead other people to do it, especially because, if if they don't really serve much, but they're really good at something, how are they going to like recruit and train and equip other people to serve when it wasn't a priority already in their life? So if you're going to ask your people at your church to do something, the leaders need to be involved. I've seen this a lot. Like, for example, small groups or whatever you call it at your church. Like, the church will talk about how small groups are important. And like some of the staff or some of the elders or even maybe like the lead pastor at times isn't involved in one. So of course they're going to struggle. It's like they'll be like, I don't know what's going on. We really struggle in this area, but they've got core leaders who are not involved in it. Listen, if it's a priority for the church, it should be a priority for the leaders. Like, you should be asking people to do things that is beneficial to them and to you. And so, are they already involved in all the things that a member or a partner should be doing? Again, this goes back to why, if they're already a part of your church, that's like a really great question to ask, because it's really easy to say, like in an interview, here's what I'm going to do, or yeah, I totally agree with that. But do their actions actually line up with what they're saying they actually care about? So are they involved in all those things? Again, it's not like it has to be perfect, not like they have to like never miss or never do anything, whatever. But like, they have to genuinely like already be doing and living the life of the church if they're going to have other people do it. If your leaders are not invested and involved in the way that you're asking your average church partner or member to be involved in, that's like the trickle-down effect is not going to go well. They're not going to be excited about it. They're not going to talk with other people about it. And if they're not going to do it, you shouldn't expect other people to do it as well. So are they involved in the things that you ask your members and partners to already be doing? If not, again, they could be awesome people. They could be very, very competent, but long-term, you're going to run into struggles because you need them to be bought into what you're doing at the church. Here's the thing, man. We all know this. Like, nobody works at a church for the money. Like, they don't work for the church for the money. There is a desire or a leading or an excitement about the mission, about being a part of, what God's doing in this local church that draws them in. And so, man, if they're not already excited about this mission and want to be a part of it, like, paying them to do it is not going to change that. And I think that's the trap that some churches fall into is like, well, they're part of our church. They like our church. They're here somewhat. They're not as committed as I might like. But like, once I start paying them, then they'll be committed because there's a paycheck involved. And sure, that might work in the short term, but like, man, you want people that are excited and invested in what you're doing. And so if they are not already doing the things a partner member is doing without you saying, hey, when you come on staff, like, here's the expectation, I think in 3 to 6 months, you're going to start potentially, maybe not always, having some issues in that area. So again, are they involved in all the things that a member and partner are already doing? If not, I would have a lot of caution before hiring this person at this time. And then last but not least, number 5, although maybe in some ways least, I mean, everything's important, but last but not fully least, but maybe a little bit least, okay? Are they competent for the position of need? Now, obviously they have to be competent, but I've just, again, over the years of New City, like, the people who are excited and bought in and show up on Sundays and are in groups and are serving, are committed financially, those make the best staff. They make the best staff because they're excited to be there. They're excited to work with the other people at church. They love the church. They love the people. Okay, so that's why it's so important. But also, they've got to be good at what they're doing. The challenge you can fall into is, hey, we need help running groups or serving or kids or whatever it might be. And you don't really have someone that can do it, but you have someone who's willing. And again, in the first couple of months, that might be good because then you have someone feeling a need. But the long term, you're going to be frustrated if they're not leading towards the vision that you want the church to be going towards. If they're not operating or have certain competencies that you want for other staff to, like, if it's very obvious that you have a staff member or a key leader, maybe depending on the size of your church, who is not doing the things that everyone else is doing, people will always regress to the lowest common denominator. It's really interesting. There's tons of studies about this. In a lot of books I read, they kind of reference these things where it's like, they'll get groups of, I'm going to butcher it because I can't obviously think of it on the top of my head, but they'll get groups of like 4 people to do, tests. And they'll do these like college campuses, that's where a lot of these psychological study things happen, where people can come and like sign up for these research studies. And so they group like students into 4 and they give them a project to work on. And then there'd be like a control group and variable groups. And some of the variable groups, they'll have someone who like doesn't care, who's got a bad attitude and like doesn't really work with a group and all that sort of thing. And in all these studies, they found it does not matter how competent or smart the best people are or the most excited people are. It always goes back to the lowest common denominator. Like the person in the group, whoever was the laziest or the grumpiest, that always determined how successful the group was, like the rates, the scores they got, how much work they accomplished. So If you have someone who's like not bought and invested, like the rest of the staff like will know, and it will have a bad effect. So they've got to be competent at what they're doing. Yes, sure. If they're not, then it's going to lead into problems. It might be fine for 3 months because you have someone who can finally, for example, schedule all the volunteers. But man, if they can't direct the volunteers, towards the mission and the vision of the church, you're going to run into issues. And of course, firing people is a lot harder than hiring them. Okay, so are they competent for the position of need? Again, sometimes what can happen is you need help and you're having a hard time filling a position. And so then you can get kind of desperate, and then you kind of like open up the horizons of what you would do. And then you will come to regret it. So it's better, as frustrating it is, I'm not saying it's not hard and frustrating. It's better to have like an open position until someone is ready for it than to just give it away and hoping that they'll get it. Now, of course, when somebody comes on staff, there's gonna have to be some like training there. I think of us, our most recent hire at New City, someone come on staff and took over our first impressions and our events and social media. And they've been at New City actually since we launched. So since day one, April, actually part of our launch team before that, and we launched in April of 2017. Been a part of our church the whole time. And they love the church, man. They love New City. Now this role, some of the things in this role, it was new to them. But I trusted their character. I trusted their leadership, and they were really excited. They've demonstrated how much they love New City Church, and it's been an awesome fit. Like they've had to learn and grow and figure out how certain things worked in terms of scheduling and how things worked and how to deal with certain conflict, or if people disagree with how we have certain things run. They have to learn and grow into that. But I was 0% hesitant because I knew this person could do it, and I knew this person loved the church. And so, are they competent and are they invested? If you've got those two things, if they have the ability to learn, then you're going to be okay. But are they competent for the position of need? Do they love the church, and will they have the ability to do it? If they've not done it before, have they demonstrated, okay, the skills that are needed for this position, can they learn them and grow into them? If you just put someone in a position because you have a need, long term, it will not lead to growth and success and ultimately health, which is the most important thing. Are they competent for the position of need? Typically, that's the first question that people ask. You've got to ask it, and it has to be a yes, but I would not ask it first because there's a lot of other things that will determine if this is a good fit or not. So again, the 5 questions you should ask: are they a part of your church? Because that's how you answer these other ones as well. Number 2, do they show up every Sunday? Are they excited about the church? Number 3, do they give financially? Like, are they clearly invested in the church? Number 4, are they already involved in all the things that a member and a partner should be doing? And then number 5, last but not least, are they competent for the position of need? Listen, if you can get 5 out of 5 yeses on this person, I guarantee you're probably hiring a high quality person for your staff. And those are the questions that I ask whenever we hire somebody at New City Church. So here's today's ministry observation, and also kind of serves as a reminder, and that's this. Remember this, that your people can't help if they don't know there is a need. Your people can't help if they don't know that their help is needed. I think sometimes we get really stressed out and anxious in ministry, whether there's a financial need or a serving need or a skill that's needed. And because we haven't expressed it, like we feel this weight of, I got to figure it out. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. We get really anxious about it. And then what happens is when you share with people, hear what's going on, very often you're surprised. It's like, oh, I could do that, or I would excited to do that, or I would love to do that. I mean, there's so many people who have skills and talents who never really think that they can make a difference at their local church. They never really think that, or because there's this idea that like to work at a church or to be a high-level volunteer or leader or whatever, I've got to like know a lot about the Bible and I've got to be following Jesus for a long time. If I probably should go to seminary or take some sort of class, and because I haven't done those things, like I'll be invested, but like certainly like quote unquote God can't use me. Okay, that's what people think. However, I've learned over the years at New City, when we share with people, like, here's what's going on, here's the things that we're praying for, people are always more likely to step up and do things because they know about it. I think sometimes, again, we can even get frustrated with our own people at our church because we have a need that's not being filled, and we should ask, like, have we clearly articulated it? Like, not just, hey, we need your help or we'd like your help, but like, here's a significant area that we're concerned about or that we're praying for and that we're just asking God to move. Now, here's the thing. If every week or every month there's like another big area of concern, yes, you're probably not going to have much success in this because it's going to feel like, well, there's always a big problem and issue, and like it doesn't seem like we can ever get ahead. But people expect like things to not always be perfect. Like right now, as I'm sharing this, as I'm recording this at New City, we're facing some financial challenges with some ideas we're trying to do, and also our building space and potentially moving next year. And so like as I'm recording this, and a week after I record this, we do a quarterly all-church Zoom meeting. We're about 20, 25 minutes. Excuse me. We share updates. And I'm going to be very honest about here's some of the challenges we're currently facing. Now, what's cool is I've already shared some of these things that I'm going to be sharing at our next quarterly all-church Zoom meeting in one-on-one conversations. And the response has always been super encouraging. It's always been encouraging because like, oh, that's so great to hear about this. I'll be praying like, what can I do to help? And so you do need to frame it in a way that's not the sky is falling, because hopefully the sky isn't falling and you've been addressing an issue before, like it literally becomes like, I don't know, unsalvageable. But people can't help if they don't actually know there's a problem. So I just want to encourage you, listen, if there's something, a deficiency or an area in your church that you're worried about, or you're praying about, like, do your people know? Do you people know? Because I think you'll be surprised at how often people are excited and willing to help and step in and pray. They just don't know. And you might say, well, we say every Sunday we need more people to serve. Well, I need more people to serve. It does not really move anything. It doesn't say like, why? Like, why do you need more people to serve? If that's an issue, like, could you share with your people, like, here's how many serve positions we'd like to fill every single Sunday. And here's why we want to fill them. Like, tell them why it's a big deal and what you're trying to do, not just say, hey, we've got a need, because people don't understand what the need is. And they can't understand like how severe, how big it is if you can't articulate like what it is and why it is you're trying to fill it and what the implications are if it doesn't get addressed. So all I want to say, I just want to encourage you, listen, your people can't help you with a need if they don't know there is a need. So be sure to share with your people and see what God might do. Well, here's today's personal growth tip, and it has to do with how to read more books. Now, I am someone personally who reads a lot. I also enjoy reading a lot. I know that everyone's a reader, so that's okay. But you might be like, hey, I want to read more books. How can I do that? I know some of you track with me on Twitter, X, I guess it's called, and Instagram. I always, about once a week or so, when I finish a book, I give a little brief update or synopsis review, and I give a scale of 1 to 10. So it's been cool to get messages over the years. People have been like, hey, that was really helpful, whatever. So I want to say, if you are a reader and you're looking for good books, you can follow me, Dylan J. Dotson, on X or Instagram. It's about once a weekish, maybe a little bit less, depending on how long the book is, or a little bit more. I'll give a little brief book review of what I read lately and what I've enjoyed. A little side note, if it's an 8 or above. If it's an 8 or above, it means I would recommend it. Okay, so that's kind of how my scoring goes. I really score it just based on how much I enjoy it. I mean, there's a lot of other factors as well, but my primary scoring is like, did I enjoy this book and did I like to keep reading? So if you're always looking for books, make sure you connect with me on social, because you'll see at least once a week, if not a little bit more, a book review from me. So I like to read a lot. Question is, hey, how can I read more books? Now, here's what you need to know. If you want to read more books, it is not about how fast you read. It's not about how fast you read, but rather it's about cultivating the habit of reading. Again, as someone who personally reads a lot of books, here are a few things that I do that I have found helpful. And of course, my encouragement is to take, leave, or adjust as you find helpful for yourself. Okay, so here's some things I found helpful. I limit the use of my phone to less than 60 minutes a day. And this includes using it for work purposes. Now, I have some exceptions. So GPS, if I'm listening to a podcast, that sort of thing. Like if I've got it on the background, it's really just GPS and podcasts. Like those are the only exceptions. In fact, you can use a screen time tracker on your phone to measure this. I will say the screen time trackers aren't always the best. So I've kind of, and personally given up on this because they'll say like I'm using it when I wasn't, but I kind of know generally speaking. But there's a limit to my phone use. And it includes like when I'm working on my phone. All of us, man, it's like a budget financially. If you don't have a budget financially, 1,000%, you're spending not just a little bit more money, a lot more money than you think you are. And it's the same thing with our phones, man. All of us spend so much more time than we think we do with our phone if we're not actually intentional with it. So if you spend less time on your phone, well, you've got time for other things. Number 2, I turn off my phone at 9:15 every night. That's what I do. I turn it off at 9:15. On the weeknights, I go to bed at the same time each night, and then I read for about 30 minutes before going to sleep. Reading also helps me fall asleep faster and that sort of thing. I could lay in bed with the light off and my eyes closed, and oftentimes I will take me longer to go to sleep than if I read for 30-ish minutes. So I have an iPad, which I know is not as best. So if I read like on my iPad, I've got like the night vision thing on, so it's like not as bright. And then I've got a reading light, a little clip-on reading light when I'm reading a physical book instead. So I read every single night. It's part of my bedtime routine, helps me fall asleep. But again, if you do that consistently, you will read more books. A part of that is turning off your phone before you go to bed. Yes, that's a whole other thing, I guess. We won't get into it now. I turn my phone off before I go to bed and I leave it downstairs. So it's like off and it's like away. If there's an emergency, I can't really help you at 2:15 in the morning anyway. So my kids get older, maybe that'll be different, but for now, I can't, there's no pastoral crisis I can help. And also my rule of thumb in life is I'm not going to live my life based on a 0.1% chance. So there's a 99.9% chance someone's not going to need me in the middle of the night, which literally since New Cities began, I've never missed a crisis that I could have done something about in the middle of the night. And so I'm not going to leave my phone on because it's such a distraction. It's so easy to look at it. So if you want to read more books, part of it is turning your phone off before you go to bed. I often read on my walking pad. So I've got a stand-up desk. Actually, I've got one at home and in the church office, and a walking pad in both places. So I typically walk and work the first hour of the day and then sometime in the afternoon as well. But a walking pad, just think of it as like a mini treadmill that only you can't really run on, you can just walk. I've also found as a side note that using this while reading helps keep my concentration up, and it helps me avoid dozing off, which can happen while reading while sitting. So I have found using my walking pad to read, it keeps me more focused and from to being distracted and from dozing off a little bit. So using a walking pad is helpful. Just a side note, if you got one, I'd recommend it. I also keep a running list of books I want to read. Basically, I always have 2 to 3 books coming up that I want to get at. And what this does is then this gives me a reason to finish the book that I'm currently reading now, because I know I have something interesting coming up. Now, sometimes I'll read a book. Again, this is a little bit delayed, but as I'm recording this, the most recent book I just finished was called The Demon of Unrest by Eric Larson. It is going to be a 10 out of 10. You'll see this coming up if you follow me on socials. 10 out of 10. It's about the 6-ish months leading up to the Civil War. It's about focusing primarily on Fort Sumter and Charleston, South Carolina, and Abraham Lincoln and his inauguration. Fascinating book. It was so good. I don't need another book to keep me reading it because it was so good. But there are also times where you get kind of duds or ones that are not interesting. It's okay, I'm going to get through this book so that I can get to the one that is interesting to me. So I always try to keep 2 or 3 coming up. I am also, just for me personally, one of those people who does finish every book I read. I mean, literally, I think in the last 2 years, I don't know, 50, I've read, I think it was 69 books last year. I probably read 70 to 80 books this year. And I think of all the ones I've read the last 2 years, I probably haven't finished one of them because I just couldn't. The reason why I found, because typically to me, a good book has 1 or 2 nuggets. And sometimes even a book is boring. I found a good nugget towards the end of the book, so I'll just keep reading. But it's helping me to push through if I got a list of books coming up. So again, I curate those on on Twitter. If somebody tweets someone who's well-known is hey, give me some of your favorite book recommendations, I'll bookmark those so I can go back to them. If I listen to a podcast or something like that, I'll make a note of okay, this person said this book was good, that sort of thing. So I am always on the lookout, but having a running list of books you want to get to helps you get through the one that you're currently on. I also make use of my local library. So this is how I get a lot of free books. I found that it depends on where you live. We live in Wake County, Raleigh, North Carolina, so there's this pretty big library system. I would say maybe let's go with 65%. 65% of the books that I want to read, my local library has it. And again, being ahead, what you can do is you can reserve it, and then they'll actually, at least in Wake County, they'll send the book, if it's in one of the libraries, to the library that's closest to you. And so they'll send it to you. And I found that the physical copy, the e-reader books in libraries, they're always checked out for forever. But the physical books often are not, or there might be a little bit of a wait list. So I'll just go to my library and then, get over probably 65 to 7% of my books that way. And then I do have a book budget at New City. I'd recommend if you're a pastor, we don't get a lot of benefits, right? And so, and not all my books are necessarily ministry related, but they do help me grow in wisdom and knowledge. And so I do think that it's helpful for a church. And so I use my local library a lot, and I get a lot of free books that way, because typically, again, they'll send it to the library closest to you, like your home library, whatever that is. And the wait for those books is often a lot less, if not non-existent. And so those are the things I do. Now again, whether reading for pleasure or for learning, you can read more than you think. Everybody can read more than they think. You just need the right habits and disciplines to make it happen. And those are some of the things that I do to read more books. And today's ministry question was posted anonymously in the Practical Church Facebook group, so I won't give away the name. But if you're not in the Practical Church Facebook group and you're on Facebook, make sure to join and get your questions asked and answered as well. Somebody posted this. At the very beginning of stages of our planting on our own, how did you start building a team and where did you start meeting? Now, so again, I'll just read the question. At the very beginning stages of planting on our own, how did you start building a team? Where did you start meeting? Now, that's a lot to answer. My biggest question, the biggest way I would answer is listen to the Practical Church podcast, which you're already doing. So we've got tons of episodes on that. I want to give a couple of really quick, high-arching things. You should be, in an ideal world, you'll be part of a local church or being sent out by a local church or have relationships with local churches in the area. So that's what ideally. If you're parachuting in, I would email a bunch of pastors and say, hey, I'd love to get lunch and just meet with as many people as you can. Okay. Generally speaking, I think anything more than if your public launch is anything more than 9 months out, you're going to have a very hard time getting people to commit to your launch team and to the church. Because to them, it seems very far away. What are you doing? I know I personally, if I had a non-ministry job and somebody approached me about joining their launch team, unless they're a really close friend that I really respected and knew very, very well and trusted, I would not join any launch team that was further than 9 months out. I wouldn't. I'm not quite sure that's going to happen. I've got my family to worry about as well, not just me. I'm good. The local church is important, so I will always be part of a local church. But I could grow spiritually. I don't need whatever. I'm personally good, but my family's important too. So I got to go somewhere where I believe there's something for them as well. And so I would join your team. So I would just say you got to know what you're doing, and you can move the launch date as it gets closer a little bit. But if you're still unsure, you're going to have a hard time building momentum. Now, so that's my big thing. If you're more than 9 months out, you're not going to build a team. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't prepare and build skills and do other things, but to publicly gather a team, if it's too far away, it's not going to happen. Now, the second question, again, is where do you start meeting? I would recommend that you would meet as a launch team as close as possible to where you want to launch publicly the church. Now, you might have to move a little bit, maybe your house or townhome, apartment or whatever, but as soon as you can, start having your launch team meetings either in the place or close to the place where you're going to publicly launch so that people get used to driving there and being there. So if your launch teams are one part of your town and then you end up planning the church 20 minutes away, well, that can really influence who's going to be a part of it and who's going to come to it. So a lot I would say of those two things, but my two high-level answers, how did you start building a team? Well, I would just say if it's over 9 months out, it's not going to be very helpful. Where do you start meeting? Meet as close as you can to where you want to publicly launch so that people are used to already being there. So a lot more you could say about that. Listen to all the archives of the Practical Church podcast to get the rest of it answered. But those are the two quick things I would say to that question. So thanks again for joining me today on the Practical Church podcast, found where all your podcasts are found and also on YouTube as well. Again, make sure you check out Mission Support, which is our partner here at Practical Church. And specifically want to highlight their ongoing web support, your website services, updates, hosting, security, all that sort of thing. If your website doesn't look that good, which by the way is super important, virtually no one's going to come to your church for the first time without checking out your website. Be sure to go to missionsupport.com, talk to a guy today, learn about how they can help you run an effective and efficient and good-looking and fast church website. And if you want more from me, you can always head to dylandotson.com, check out some of my other resources I got there, and I'll be with you in 2 weeks for the next episode of the Practical Church podcast.